Hello and welcome to the Caipiteal presentation on ending all conflict and collaboration. So this presentation is mainly on the game theory of conflict and collaboration. So the way we've gotten here in the world is through conflict and collaboration. That's how it all works. So either working together or working against each other. But this presentation should show the basic science, I suppose, of conflict and how we can end all conflict essentially and move towards a more collaborative world. And the reason for that is the best scientific outcome is a collaborative game as opposed to a win-lose game. So essentially this should solve all potential future wars or all family feuds or any sort of conflict that should arise. This should be able to solve it because it presents the logic behind the actions we should take. So we've separated a conflict into 4 different sections. So the first section is a lose-lose situation. The second section is a win-lose where player 1 wins, player 2 loses. Third section is where player 1 loses and player 1 wins. And the fourth section is where both players win. So 1, 2, and 3, they're all win-lose game states. And 4 is a collaborative game state where you actually work together. And the moral of the story is it's always better to move into quadrant 4 or stay in quadrant 4 because it's always better to play a collaborative game over a win-lose game, even when you're winning and someone else is losing. And we're going to explain that a little bit later on and why that is the case. So in the following slides, we're going to talk about just player 1, but again, the same logic applies to player 2 in this situation. So we'll move on. So we'll start with player 1 in quadrant 1. So if player 1 is in a lose-lose state, their absolute best option is to move into a win-win state. The reason for this is if they move into a win-lose state, which is quadrant 2, so the best option is to move into quadrant 4, second best option is to move into quadrant 2, and third best option is to stay in quadrant 1. They don't want to go into quadrant 3 really. There's no real benefit for them to go into quadrant 3. So if they go to quadrant 4, they're safe and both players win. If they go to quadrant 2, this is where a lot of people like to move, but it's the illogical move, where they win and the other person loses. Then the best option for player 2 in that case is obviously to move into quadrant 4. Which we'll show a little bit later. But their second best option is to move into quadrant 3, which would place player 1 in a lose position and them in a win position. And then obviously their last option is to stay in the lose-lose position. So absolutely, we want to move into quadrant 4 if we're in a lose-lose state because we're not safe in quadrant 2, because if player 2 doesn't want to move into quadrant 4, then they'll want to move into quadrant 3, which is a lose win for player 1, and that's not beneficial at all for player 1. So obviously we want to go into a win-win state. So let's look at quadrant 2 again now. So if we're in quadrant 2, if we're winning and player 2 is losing, then we want to move into a win-win state. The reason again for this is if we're winning and player 2 is losing, player 2's best option is to go for a win-win, but their second best option is to go for a lose-win, which is quadrant 3. So we're not safe in quadrant 2 because player 2 could want to move into quadrant 3 if we don't move into quadrant 4 ourselves. Okay, again now, quadrant 3. So if we're losing and player 2 is winning, then obviously we want to win-win, of course, because it's beneficial for both players. It's the equilibrium state. If player 2 refuses to play a win-win, so like in war, for example, they're like, no, we win, you lose, then our best option is to move into quadrant 2, and then our third best option is to move into quadrant 1. So, and again, we've discussed quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 before. If we move into either of those, it's always better to move into quadrant 4, the win-win state again. So of course, from quadrant 3, we should always be looking to move into a win-win again. So if we're losing and someone else is winning, we should be going for a win-win. literally, if they're not smart enough to play a win-win, then that's the only reason we should be moving into quadrant 2 where we win and they lose. If they're not smart enough to play a win-win game, a collaborative game, then we should be looking to move into quadrant 2. Finally, if you're in a win-win position, it's very easy. We've talked about the other 3 quadrants. So if you're in the win-win position, stay there, maintain it, and make sure you keep winning and make sure the other player in the game or players in the game keep winning as well, because you'll all help each other in that case. And that's really it. That should solve all future conflict. It's logic. It's the science behind conflict and collaboration. The most logical choice is always, always, always to move, no matter what quadrant you're in, either stay or move into quadrant 4. History has taught that people usually fluctuate between 3 and 2 and never even consider 4. But the scientific answer is quadrant 4, and that should solve all conflicts and kind of force collaborations between governments or between families, etc. But again, obviously, if they're not smart enough to play a win-win, then you should obviously be looking for yourselves to win and them to lose. That's the only reason you should be looking for you to win and someone else to lose, is if they're not smart enough to play a win-win or a collaborative game with you. That's it, guys.